In the small town of Hollow Grove, there lived a young woman named Clara who had recently started a new chapter in her life. After years of working odd jobs, she finally landed a position at a local antique shop run by a quirky but kind-hearted owner named Mr. Hargrove. The shop was a treasure trove of peculiar items, each with its own history and mystery. One rainy afternoon, as Clara was organizing a dusty bookshelf in the back corner, she stumbled upon an ornate, ancient-looking mirror. The frame was intricately carved with swirling vines and leaves, and despite the dust, the glass sparkled as if it had been polished recently. Intrigued, she decided to ask Mr. Hargrove about it. "Oh, that old thing," he chuckled, adjusting his glasses. "It's said to be cursed. Some claim it shows you not just your reflection, but also your deepest fears." Clara, always the skeptic, laughed it off. "Curse? That sounds like a story to sell it." "Maybe," he replied, a hint of seriousness in his tone. "But strange things have happened around that mirror. I'd be careful if I were you." That night, Clara couldn't shake her curiosity about the mirror. After closing the shop, she stayed behind, her mind racing with thoughts of what Mr. Hargrove had said. As she stood before the mirror, she felt an inexplicable pull, as if the glass was inviting her in. She took a deep breath and leaned closer. Suddenly, the air grew cold and the reflection shimmered. Clara gasped as the image morphed, revealing a dark figure lurking behind her in the glass. Heart racing, she spun around, but the shop was empty. Returning her gaze to the mirror, she saw only her own startled expression staring back. Shaken, Clara decided to leave, but as she turned to go, the mirror's surface rippled like water. She felt drawn to it once more and reached out, her fingertips brushing the cool glass. In that instant, a vision flooded her mind. A glimpse of a distant, foggy forest and a fleeting shadow disappearing between the trees. The next day, Clara couldn't concentrate at work. The image of the forest haunted her thoughts. After closing the shop, she felt compelled to explore the woods depicted in her vision. She drove her old car to the edge of the forest, where the trees loomed tall and dark, whispering secrets of the past. As she walked deeper into the woods, Clara felt an otherworldly presence surrounding her. The air was thick with fog, and the sunlight barely penetrated the canopy. She could hear a distant sound, like the echo of someone calling her name. "Clara! Clara!" It was faint, yet insistent. Following the sound, she stumbled upon a clearing. In the center stood an ancient tree, gnarled and twisted, with a hollow at its base. A feeling of dread washed over her, but curiosity prevailed. She approached the tree, peering into the hollow. Inside, she found an old diary, its pages yellowed and fragile. Opening it, Clara discovered entries from a girl named Lila, who had lived in Hollow Grove many years ago. The last entry sent chills down her spine. "I can hear them calling. I fear they want me to join them in the dark." Clara looked around, her heart pounding. She felt as if the forest was alive, watching her, waiting for her to make a move. Just as she turned to leave, the whispering returned, now louder and more urgent. "Clara, come play with us." Panicking, Clara fled the clearing and ran back through the trees. The whispers echoed behind her, growing fainter but still haunting her every step. When she finally reached her car, she slammed the door and unlocked it, gasping for breath. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. The diary had awakened something within her, a connection to Lila and the mystery that surrounded her. She felt she had to uncover the truth. The next day, she returned to the antique shop, determined to find out more about Lila and the mirror's curse. Mr. Hargrove listened intently as she recounted her experiences. Lila was a special girl, he said, a somber look in his eyes. She was lost to the woods long ago. Some believe she still wanders, searching for a way to escape. What do you mean? Clara asked, intrigued yet frightened. They say the mirror is a portal of sorts, he explained. It connects to the souls trapped in the forest. If you're not careful, it can lure you in and keep you there forever. Clara's heart raced at the thought. How do I help her? Mr. Hargrove sighed. You must confront your fears. The forest feeds on them, and only by facing what you dread can you hope to set her free. With a newfound determination, Clara decided to return to the forest. This time, she would not run from the whispers, but face them head on. She arrived at the clearing as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting eerie shadows around her. Lila, she called out, her voice steady. I'm here. I want to help you. The forest fell silent. Then a soft breeze stirred, and Clara felt a chill run down her spine. The whispers returned, this time clearer, as if Lila herself was guiding her. Follow me. Clara took a deep breath and followed the sound, her heart pounding. She found herself retracing her steps to the ancient tree where the diary lay waiting. As she knelt to pick it up, a figure emerged from the shadows. Lila, or what remained of her. Why did you come? Layla asked, her voice echoing with sadness. I want to set you free, Claire replied, her voice unwavering. Layla's eyes, once full of fear, now sparkled with hope. You must face the darkness that binds me. Only then can I escape. Claire nodded, steeling herself. She closed her eyes and focused on her deepest fears. The loneliness, the haunting memories of her past, the doubt that crept in during quiet moments. As she acknowledged each one, she felt a weight lifting from her heart. The darkness around her began to shift, and Claire opened her eyes to see the fog clearing. The ancient tree shimmered, revealing a path that glowed with a warm light. This is the way, Lila whispered. Together, they stepped onto the path, and Claire felt a surge of energy flow through her. With each step, the whispers faded, replaced by a sense of peace. They reached a radiant clearing where the sunlight bathed them in warmth. Clara turned to Lila, who smiled, her figure beginning to dissolve into light. Thank you, Clara, Lila said softly. You freed us both. With that, Lila vanished, leaving Clara standing alone, but filled with a profound sense of clarity. She had faced her fears and helped a lost soul find peace. The forest was silent now, and as Clara made her way back home, she felt lighter, as if the weight of the world had been lifted from her shoulders. In the days that followed, Clara continued her work at the antique shop, but she carried with her a sense of purpose. She would honor Lila's memory by sharing stories of courage and connection, reminding others that sometimes the path to freedom lies in confronting our deepest fears. And though the mirror remained in the shop, Clara felt no fear of his curse. Instead, she saw it as a symbol of her journey, a reminder that even in the darkest places, there's always a light waiting to be discovered. Shadows of Elmwood. Nestled between mountains and thick forests, Elmwood was known for its serene beauty and tight-knit community. However, beneath this picturesque exterior lay dark secrets. As whispers of an unresolved mystery grew louder, one person's curiosity would uncover a chilling tale that had haunted the town for generations. Emily Carter, a determined journalist in her late 20s, had always been drawn to the extraordinary. When she received an anonymous tip about several townsfolk disappearing in Elmwood, her instincts kicked in. Years ago, many residents had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only confusion and fear. The last known sightings of these individuals were linked to the long-abandoned Elmwood Library. Upon arriving in Elmwood, a mix of excitement and anxiety surged through Emily. As she walked through the town's streets, she noticed the wary glances of the locals. Their eyes reflected a deep-rooted fear, as if the town lived under the shadows of the missing. Pushing aside her apprehensions, she stood before the library, its broken windows and decaying walls beckoning her to uncover the truth. Stepping inside the library, dust particles danced in the beams of dim light. As she wandered through the narrow aisles filled with old books and musty odors, Emily began her exploration. While browsing the shelves, she stumbled upon a worn diary hidden beneath a loose floorboard. It belonged to the eccentric former librarian, Agnes Blackwood. The entries revealed the existence of a mysterious cult that had once convened within the library, seeking to harness dark powers. As she read on, she became increasingly captivated by a reference to a sinister artifact known as the Shadow Mirror. According to Agnes, this mirror had the power to unveil one's deepest fears, but at a terrible price. Those who looked into it often disappeared. Emily's heart raced. It was clear that the cult and the mirror were tied to the town's history of disappearances. She needed to find the mirror and uncover the truth. Determined to find the Shadow Mirror, Emily delved deeper into the town's records and interviewed a few reluctant residents. They spoke of shadowy figures lurking at the edges of their vision and an inexplicable sense of dread creeping into their homes. An elderly woman named Mrs. Thompson revealed that her husband had vanished after he saw the mirror. He said he saw something he shouldn't have, she whispered, her eyes brimming with tears. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together. Emily discovered that the library had been the center of the cult's activities. Armed with this new information, she returned to the library on a stormy night. She was determined to confront the darkness that had plagued Elmwood for so long. As thunder rumbled outside, Emily descended into the library's basement, believing it to be where the cult performed their rituals. The air grew cold, and an unexplainable energy filled the room. In the center stood the Shadow Mirror, its ornate frame looming ominously, intricate carvings seeming to writhe under her gaze. Taking a deep breath, she approached the mirror. Its surface began to ripple, and images of the missing townsfolk emerged, faces twisted in fear. Emily felt an irresistible urge to look deeper, wanting to understand what had happened. As she gazed into the mirror, dark figures seemed to swirl around her, whispering her name. The voices echoed, each word sending shivers down her spine. She was not merely observing the past, she was becoming a part of it. Shadows began to reach for her, pulling her towards the mirror's surface. In that moment of panic, Emily recalled Mrs. Thompson's words about her husband. He saw something he shouldn't have. Suddenly, she understood she had a choice to make: succumb to fear or fight against it. Gathering her strength, she shouted, "I will not accept this." The mirror trembled violently, and the shadows recoiled in anger. In that instant, she realized that she could see not only her fears, but also the power she held. Turning towards the staircase, she focused on the light seeping through the doorway. The shadow screamed in fury, but Emily sprinted for the exit, the cold darkness reaching out to drag her back. As she reached the door, a thunderous crash resonated behind her. The mirror shattered, its shards scattering across the floor. The following morning, news of the library's destruction spread through Elmwood. The townsfolk, who had lived in fear for so long, felt a weight lift from their shoulders. Emily left Elmwood with a heavy but hopeful heart. The darkness that had haunted the town was gone, but the memories lingered. As she drove away, she thought she saw a shadow move among the ruins of the library in her rearview mirror. Shaking her head, she tried to dismiss the thought. She had faced the darkness and won, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Elmwood's secrets were not entirely buried. Deep in her heart, she knew some stories were meant to remain hidden. Yet the shadows of Elmwood would always whisper, waiting for another curious soul to listen. Everything started when I decided to move to a small, quiet town in Maine. I needed a fresh start, and the affordable rent made this old house seem like the perfect place. The landlord mentioned that the previous tenant had moved out in a rush. At the time, I didn't give it much thought. I was just eager to settle in and make this place feel like home. The first few days were uneventful. The house was spacious, but a bit worn, with some furniture left behind. I unpacked and tried to get comfortable, but something about the place felt off. It wasn't anything obvious, just a sense that the walls held secrets, as if the house was quietly observing me. One night, I woke up to a faint tapping sound. My heart raced, but I told myself it was just the wind rattling the windows. Still, I felt the need to check. I wandered through the dark house, and that's when I noticed something odd on the kitchen table. An old key. I could have sworn it wasn't there before. It had a small tag attached, but the writing was too faded to read. Curiosity got the best of me. There had to be a door somewhere in the house that this key would unlock. I began exploring every nook and cranny, eventually finding a locked cabinet in the basement. Dusty, untouched, and forgotten. Despite the chill running down my spine, I slid the key into the lock and turned it. The door creaked open, revealing a cramped storage space filled with old boxes. Inside one of the boxes were black and white photographs, dozens of them. They showed the house as it had been many years ago. But the strangest part, in every single photo, there was the same tall, unfamiliar man, standing in different corners of the house as if he belonged there. Those pictures unsettled me. I couldn't stop wondering who that man was and why he appeared in every photo. One picture, in particular, sent a shiver down my spine. The man was staring into a mirror, but his reflection had no face. After that discovery, nights became unbearable. I kept hearing strange noises, curtains swaying on their own, objects shifting ever so slightly. I told myself it was just my imagination. But everything changed on the night I woke up to a whisper right next to my ear. Find me. It wasn't a dream. The voice was real. My entire body froze. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. And then, in the dim light of the room, I saw a shadow at the foot of my bed. My breath caught in my throat. The shadow. It was him, the man from the photographs. Gathering every bit of courage I had, I reached for the bedside lamp. As soon as the light flooded the room, the shadow vanished, but the sense of dread remained. I knew I had to figure out who he was and what he wanted. I returned to the basement and dug deeper into the boxes. That's when I found it, a worn red journal filled with cryptic notes. According to the journal, the man had once lived in this house. His name was Charles, and he had died here, though the circumstances of his death were unclear. The journal hinted that Charles's soul was trapped in the house, and he wouldn't be free until someone uncovered the truth. At the back of the journal was an address, an old abandoned estate on the outskirts of town. The next morning, I drove there. The place was in ruins, its walls crumbling under the weight of years. Inside, I found a large mirror, identical to the one in the photograph. I stood in front of it, and for a moment, I thought I saw Charles's reflection behind me. When I turned, the room was empty. In the basement of the estate, I found an old trunk. Inside was a letter, written in shaky handwriting. It explained that Charles had been murdered, his body hidden somewhere in the house, and his spirit left to wander. The letter claimed that whoever found it would be the one to set him free. When I returned home, the haunting grew worse. Lights flickered, furniture shifted, and strange whispers echoed through the house. I knew I wasn't alone anymore. Charles was always there, lurking just out of sight. One night, I stood in front of the mirror and spoke aloud. "I found you. You're free now." For a moment, everything in the house went still. Then, from deep within the mirror, I heard a faint whisper. "Thank you." The house finally felt quiet, as if a great weight had been lifted. But I could never bring myself to look into that mirror again. Even now, some nights, I swear I can still hear a whisper coming from behind the glass. "Thank you for finding me." So the next time you stand in front of a mirror, ask yourself, what's really looking back at you? And if it speaks, are you ready to listen?
After graduating from university, I needed to find a new job, and quickly. I reached out to a familiar landlord through social media to find a place to live. He informed me about an apartment that had recently become available due to a previous tenant being evicted for unpaid rent. I thought it was a great opportunity to check out the place. The apartment looked nice, but my mind was solely focused on my new job. So I brought only a bed and a desktop computer, leaving the other 2 rooms empty for the time being. As time passed, I settled into my apartment and transformed it into a real home. 3 years later, I decided to clear out some of the stuff, and I discussed storage options with my landlord. He reminded me of a storage area in the basement that had been used by the previous tenant. This surprised me. I'd been so stressed during the move that I hadn't even thought about it. Curious, I ventured down to the basement and stumbled upon a grimy traffic test mannequin. There was a hastily written note on it that read, "Mr. Chaos." It looked quite worn, but still wore a smile. According to the landlord, the previous tenant had used this mannequin for parties and pranks. It looked like a relic from years ago. I pondered what to do with it and decided to incorporate it into my upcoming Halloween party. I planned to dress it up and place it by the door. However, the creaking joints and lifeless grin sent a shiver down my spine. On the night of the Halloween party, my friends gathered for a fun-filled evening. The mannequin stood at the door, surrounded by snacks, serving as a quirky photo booth for my guests. But as the night wore on, I indulged a bit too much in the drinks, ultimately becoming so inebriated that I forgot most of the night. When I finally returned home, I noticed the front door was wide open. I swore I had locked it, but my carelessness had slipped my mind. Upon entering, I realized Mr. Chaos was missing from the doorway. Everything else seemed intact, but unease settled over me. I messaged my friends about the situation, but no one had seen him. He was completely gone. A few days later, while walking in the rain, a voice in my head told me to stop. When I turned around, I saw Mr. Chaos standing on the roof of the building, leaning forward as if preparing to jump. I rushed up the stairs to retrieve him, but slipped in the rain and fell, sending the mannequin crashing onto the street. Later that day, feeling a bit down, I decided to get rid of Mr. Chaos. The next day, I prepared to take him to a riverbank to bury him. But when I arrived, as I began to cut the mannequin apart with my tool, a strange feeling washed over me. Something felt very wrong. I sensed there was something hidden inside it, as if it harbored something that shouldn't be in my life. With these thoughts echoing in my mind, I struck the mannequin's face and something suddenly burst forth from it. To my horror, a corpse emerged from within the mannequin. It was the body of a man who had gone missing years ago. Panic surged through me as I sprinted back to my car, frantically trying to call the police. However, before I could dial, someone knocked me unconscious. When I regained consciousness, I found myself in a dark place, trapped in the trunk of my own car. Eventually, I managed to escape, but Mr. Chaos was still lurking behind me. When the police arrived, I couldn't explain anything about the bodies I had encountered. My escape story sounded like something out of a bizarre fiction. Yet, deep down, I knew that Mr. Chaos was still with me. I can't help but reflect on that night. Perhaps there were more bodies hidden away, and what I saw was just a fraction of what lay inside Mr. Chaos. Now, I live with the haunting memory of his smile and the emptiness in his eyes. Perhaps this is a cycle that will never end.